That's fine. Is citizen farmer? President. You want to come at us? You want to come at us? I say go get yourself some lunch, big boy. Go ahead. Out of the car. Get out of the car. Get out of the car. The incident began with a controversial gunshot during a federal immigration enforcement operation in Minneapolis. During the mission, an IC agent was forced to use deadly force after a vehicle drove toward officers, creating an immediate threat, according to federal officials. Authorities later stated the action followed established self-defense protocols. This person was not a random passerby who just happened to be driving through her neighborhood. This person is part of a group of people who formed convoys to interfere with federal law enforcement operations. The single shot did not end the operation. It triggered a far broader federal investigation that uncovered a major criminal network, multi-state raids, and corruption reaching into city government. Rights operation in Minnesota, for example, is finding hundreds of killers, violent predators, and child rapists, some of the worst criminal offenders anywhere in the world, murderers all over the place. Within hours, a local incident escalated into a multi-state federal emergency. 15 judges were arrested. A sitting mayor was detained. Dozens of children were found and concealed and suspended. Conditions that changed the case forever. This is not just a crime story. This is a national emergency. Let me show you. 3:45 a.m. Just before dawn, federal command issued a single signal. Within seconds, unmarked vehicles rolled into position across Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas, while parallel teams sealed targets in Minnesota, Iowa, and Illinois. Headlights went dark. Radios dropped to a whisper. 3:47 a.m. Doors were breached almost simultaneously. Agents flooded hallways shouting commands as startled judges were pulled from their beds. Phones were seized. Laptops were unplugged mid-boot. Stairwells and exits were locked down to prevent evidence destruction. 3:52 a.m. In Illinois, one judge was intercepted in a parking garage. In Minnesota, another was detained at his front door. In Texas, a vehicle was blocked before it could leave the driveway. Handcuffs clicked shut one after another. By 4:10 a.m., all 15 sitting judges were in custody. These were senior officials tied to major narcotics trials and federal appeals. By 8:30 a.m., the impact was undeniable. More than 1,000 criminal cases were flagged for emergency review, sending shock waves through court systems across multiple states. This is a national scale emergency where the justice system itself became the crime scene. Like the video in Comet, justice must stand. As the arrest sent shock waves through the courts, investigators followed the data trail. Bank transfers sealed, petitions, delayed warrants, and synchronized rulings all converged on a single source of control. At the center stood Hassan Dul, Minneapolis's 55-year-old mayor. In public dwell, appeared untouchable. He was celebrated as a success story of integration, praised for his hardline stance against drug crime, and protected by a favorable media narrative. Polls consistently placed his approval rating above 72%. Behind closed doors, however, his life was collapsing. Investigators uncovered severe gambling debts, a costly divorce, and mounting financial pressure to maintain a lifestyle far beyond what his salary could support. Money was no longer influence. It was survival. Once his role was confirmed, federal agents moved quickly. Shortly after noon, armored vehicles sealed off the mayor's Minneapolis residence. Neighbors were ordered indoors as agents breached the home. Everything appeared ordinary until a concealed panel beneath the staircase was forced open. The hidden basement revealed two locked rooms. In the room on the left, agents found stacks of black wrapped packages weighing several tons, consistent with large-scale fentanyl storage. In the room on the right, sealed behind reinforced steel, officers made a far darker discovery. 50 children found suspended in restraints, while others were held in silent confinement, completely hidden from the outside world. In that moment, the case changed forever. This was no longer just about corrupt judges or compromised rulings. It was about the abuse of power. At the highest level, a city leader who weaponized the justice system to shield drug shipments, silence the courts, and traffic in human lives. And the downfall had only just begun. Comment, stop. Using poison if you believe these drugs should never reach another family. The arrests unfolded, prosecutors began dissecting how parts of the system had been compromised and how Mayor Hassan Dul had placed a price on justice. Investigators uncovered encrypted ledgers and witness testimony detailing a clear hidden fee schedule used by corrupt intermediaries and compliant judges. A simple procedural violation, missing paperwork, a late filing, or a technical error cost between $40,000 and $60,000, enough to weaken a case without drawing attention. To dismiss an entire prosecution, the price rose to approximately $150,000. Charges disappeared. The accused walked free. Official records showed no wrongdoing. The most expensive service involved appeals, a reversed appellate ruling, often the final barrier keeping cartel leaders behind bars, cost nearly $300,000 per case. With a single signature, years of investigative work collapsed. These were not isolated favors. Each manipulated ruling protected drug shipments worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Judges did not need to touch drugs or weapons. Their role was simpler but far more dangerous. Delay, dismiss, and deflect. Legal procedures were weaponized, destroying cases from within while preserving a facade of legitimacy. Money was broken into multiple transfers to avoid federal reporting thresholds and routed through shell accounts across several states. On paper, everything appeared transparent. In reality, justice itself became a commodity, bought, sold, and traded to quietly sustained cartel operations. Few believe corruption survives because people remain silent. Comment, no more silence. With the corruption exposed, federal authorities reached a final conclusion. This was no longer a judicial scandal. It was an active cartel network operating in real time. The order was clear: dismantle the entire structure in a single coordinated strike. Between 00 and 2 a.m., the operation shifted from planning to war. More than 800 federal agents deployed silently across Illinois, Iowa, and Minnesota. No sirens, low radios, speed, shock, and total control before the network could react. The first breaches came at fortified warehouses on the outskirts of Minneapolis. Steel doors were blown inward with concussive charges. Flashbangs detonated, flooding concrete corridors with white light and thunder. Armed guards opened fire from behind stacked pallets, triggering the first exchange. Agents advanced. The pattern replicated a warehouse. Office concealed a ledger logging $940,000 per week routed through shell service. Firms tied to prior benefit grant filings. The narcotics pipeline and financial stream were no longer separate worlds. They were two halves of the same machine. The raid lasted 36 minutes and 19 seconds. By the time the street lights dimmed into mist, the first Minneapolis cell had fallen. But intelligence traffic suggested something far more unsettling. Across a seized burner phone, a short message blinked. Phase 2 rewrote North 48 hours. Operation Iron North wasn't the climax. It was only the opening strike. Millions of doses cross state corridors, crypto logistics roles, a functioning urban cell. If you support the agents risking their lives inside these raids, comment, respect. Hit like, because the deeper we go, the darker this network becomes. 6:32 a.m. the morning after the raid. Inside the temporary federal command room in downtown Minneapolis, the lights dimmed as analysts projected a sprawling digital map across the central display. Red nodes pulsed across the metro grid. Minneapolis, St. Paul, Brooklyn, Park, Rochester. Each point representing a relay site, a financial transfer hub, or a suspected logistics safe unit. Overnight, every seized device, ledger, extract, and crypto trail had been ingested into the forensic network system. What emerged was not chaos, was architecture, a lattice of operations layered across the city. Courier channels ran along student housing corridors and short-term rentals. Near campus districts, financial transfers pulsed outward through shell. Vendors and service offices. Pickups clustered along light industrial strips and aging warehouse zones, creating what analysts referred to as urban shadow arteries, routes designed to move money, product, and people without ever appearing centralized. The discovery stunned even veteran investigators. This wasn't a street operation scaling upward. It was a distributed command economy. A senior DHS examiner traced one data spine that originated from a community vendor. Filing tied to pandemic-era program reimbursements. The company reported minimal activity, yet its banking records reflected seven-figure cash fluctuations across 11 consecutive months. The outgoing transfers flowed into consulting bureaus, logistics, subcontractors, short-term business fronts, and from there into runner stipend pools feeding the Minneapolis Courier network. The narcotic system didn't merely coexist beside government benefit fraud. A segment of the diverted funds was actively sustaining it. By mid-morning, analysts identified 11 shell corporations with no organic revenue, 23 business accounts operating cash-heavy, yet service inactive, multiple addresses, listing rotating signatories overlapping, names resurfacing across unrelated filings. It was a financial maze built to blur accountability, not for one crime ring but for multiple interlinked economies hidden beneath legitimate infrastructure. Then another layer surfaced from the seized laptops. Investigators extracted a logistics planning sheet labeled simply North Corridor Phase Windows. The schedule synchronized payout cycles with freight style movement intervals along I-94 and I-35 using legitimate shipping calendars. As camouflage, courier stipends increased in periods where shipment volumes spiked, while crypto inflows aligned with offshore exchange transfers in Mexico and the Pacific Northwest. Interagency analysts cross-matched the timing against regional narcotic seizures. The correlation was unmistakable. The Minneapolis cell had functioned as a finance relay, a staging hub, a distribution coordinator, all while remaining buried inside normal urban activity. Parents called college hotlines. Students reported unmarked vehicles circling dorm streets. Overnight, local authorities urged calm, but word spread quickly that the raids were not a one-side anomaly. They were part of something larger, something woven quietly into the daily life of the city. And beneath the calm, a realization set in. The operation had not exposed the entire network. It had exposed one layer. A Homeland Security analyst froze the map on a single repeating number. A prepaid international line tied to multiple aliases across Minneapolis, St. Paul, and 2 warehouse sites south of Rochester. That number appeared again on a burner device recovered from the St. Paul ledger office. Minutes later, it resurfaced in an encrypted financial export routed through an offshore clearing node. The pattern was no longer coincidence. It was command. And as the room fell silent, a new message appeared across the live trace monitor. Phase 2. Window inbound review 1958. The Minneapolis hub wasn't retreating. Was repositioning. 1958 p.m. The I-94 corridor. The sun had already disappeared behind the tree line when the alert hit the command screens. Narrow encrypted transmission traced to the same international prepaid number. Flagged across multiple Minneapolis relay sites. Phase 2 reroute north. The message wasn't theoretical anymore. It was live. Within minutes, federal task units mobilized along the rural highway stretches west of the metro belt. Unmarked reconnaissance vehicles slipped into traffic while aerial surveillance swept the darkened fields bordering the interstate. The convoy profile matched the logistics timing. Sheets seized during Operation Iron North. Staggered movements, extended rest windows, and transport vehicles disguised as regional freight haulers. No sirens, no spotlight, only patience. At 2011, thermal imaging picked up 3 heavy-duty trucks idling beneath a dense patch of roadside trees. Engines still warmed, their brake lights dead in the darkness. The signal delay wasn't random. It was a holding pattern meant to avoid way station scans and traffic cameras. The clock was running. Perimeter units sealed the county line, while tactical vehicles drifted into position like shadows across the pavement. Radio traffic went silent as drivers switched to night vision rigs, waiting for the single word authorization that would decide whether the convoy rolled into the interstate or vanished into the bloodstream of the nation. Intercept authorized. Headlights erupted across the roadway. The first truck surrendered almost instantly, the driver stepping out with both hands raised as tactical operators closed around him. The second vehicle lunged forward, grinding through gravel as it tried to breach the roadblock, only to be boxed in and forced into the roadside ditch, the engine choking out in a plume of smoke. The third truck resisted longest. The trailer door gave way under the breech charge, revealing compressed powder bricks stacked in layered compartments, packaging identical to the inventory seized in Minneapolis. Concealed panel behind the load opened into a false bulkhead lined with unregistered firearms and disassembled tactical components. Agents cataloged the contents in stunned silence. Fentanyl powder prepared for conversion. Compressed tablet material distribution. Ready shipment trays enough to generate millions of lethal doses if it reached its final relays. In a smaller compartment wrapped in industrial plastic, investigators recovered partial launcher tubing components consistent with black market arms supply chains previously linked to transnational narcotics networks. The cargo, industrial grade hydraulic presses capable of compressing 100 kilograms loads. Vacuum sealing machines designed for maritime transport. Precision digital scales calibrated far beyond street level needs. Chemical supplies, acetone, ether, hydrochloric acid stored in quantities consistent with large-scale processing, not storage. The conclusion was unavoidable. This facility had not merely held cocaine. It had actively processed and packaged it. As DA specialists moved deeper, they discovered a secured side chamber containing metal filing cabinets and reinforced lockers. Inside were spiral-bound notebooks, physical ledgers, deliberately chosen over digital records, page after page of handwritten entries filled with dates, weights, destination codes, and payment figures. Initial review showed entries spanning July through December 2024, documenting more than 200 individual shipments. Line represented loads ranging from 50 to 500 kilograms routed through coded destinations tied to ports across the Caribbean and Central America. Analysts would later estimate that those 6 months alone accounted for over 40 tons of cocaine, generating transaction values exceeding $800 million. These were not projections. They were records written, organized, and maintained with bureaucratic precision. Nearby, FBI cyber specialists powered up a desktop computer left running in an office cove within the bunker. Password protections were bypassed in minutes. What surfaced on the hard drive transformed suspicion into certainty. Email chains linked Venezuelan military officers with cartel intermediaries. Spreadsheets detailed profit splits down to exact percentages. Scan bank transfer receipts traced funds moving through offshore accounts in Panama, the British Virgin Islands, and Cyprus. Then came the video files. Security footage from inside the bunker showed uniformed officials overseeing packaging operations. Men in military dress inspected bricks, supervised weighing, and approved shipment loads. In one clip, dated November 12, 2024, a senior officer could be seen walking the floor, issuing instructions as if touring a government warehouse. There was no secrecy in their behavior, no fear of exposure. The bunker had been treated as sovereign space. As the files were cross-referenced, CIA analysts matched names, faces, and voices to years of intercepted communications. What had once been fragments, partial signals, incomplete human reports now aligned into a single coherent structure. This was not corruption at the margins. This was command-level coordination planned and executed from the top down. In the final chamber, investigators uncovered something even more telling. Administrative correspondence, authorizing shipments through military controlled ports without inspection. Digital signatures tied approvals directly to the highest offices of the state. The paperwork read like routine. Governance. Formal language stamped. Authorizations, distribution memos. Only. The cargo made it extraordinary. By 6:01 a.m. the picture was complete. The bunker was not an anomaly. It was the central node of a national enterprise, embedded beneath the presidential palace. To ensure absolute protection. Above ground, power had worn suits and uniforms. Below ground, it had kept ledgers, balances, and schedules, and together they revealed a government that had not been infiltrated by crime but rebuilt around it. By the time the bunker's contents were fully catalogued, the operation had already expanded far beyond Caracas. At 6:18 a.m. inside a secure command center offshore, a massive digital map flickered to life. Red markers bloomed across the screen, each one representing a cartel asset, a processing site, a laundering front, or a compromised official. What had begun beneath a single palace was now exposed as a hemispheric system. Within Venezuela alone, analysts identified 47 primary targets, but the network did not respect borders. DA intelligence traced outbound routes through Panama and the Dominican Republic, while CIA confirmed financial nodes stretching into Central America and Europe. The order moved quickly. This was the moment to strike, before the shock wave dissipated. Marabo, just after 7 a.m. assault. Teams backed by armored vehicles stormed an industrial park hiding a cocaine super lab. The facility was producing paste at a rate exceeding 200 kilograms per week. Agents seized 3.7 tons of cocaine, thousands of layers of precursor chemicals, and arrested 22 cartel operators attempting to flee through rear service tunnels. Minutes later in Valencia, a convoy of armored SUVs linked to cartel enforcement units was intercepted on a coastal highway. Gunfire erupted as drivers attempted to break through the cordon. The exchange lasted less than 3 minutes. Inside the vehicles, agents recovered $1.10 tons of cocaine, $4.30 million in cash, and an arsenal that included assault rifles and fragmentation grenades. At Puerto Cabo, Venezuela's most critical port, Navy SEALs boarded a foreign-flagged cargo vessel already loaded for departure. Hidden behind crates marked as agricultural machinery were 6.8 tons of cocaine bound for Europe. Simultaneously, Marine raiders secured the dock facilities, preventing any secondary extraction attempts. Further inland near the Colombian border, teams uncovered a network of reinforced underground tunnels complete with ventilation, lighting, and electric transport carts. Intelligence confirmed the tunnels had been operational for at least 5 years, moving cocaine, weapons, and migrants under military protection. At the terminus of one tunnel, agents breached a fortified compound used for human trafficking. 17 hostages were rescued. 9 cartel operatives were taken into custody. By midday, the cumulative numbers were staggering. Across multiple cities and ports, the operation had seized over 27 tons of cocaine, $89 million in cash, and hundreds of weapons, while arresting more than 100 individuals directly tied to the regime's narcotics infrastructure. But the scope widened further. FBI and financial investigators followed the money outward into shell companies in Panama, laundering hubs in the Dominican Republic, logistics corridors through Honduras and Guatemala, and distribution cells operating inside the United States, Miami, Houston, New York, Los Angeles. Each location surfaced as another pressure point in the same system. By nightfall, the conclusion was unavoidable. This was not a Venezuelan crisis. It was a continental one. The narco state had functioned as the logistical heart of cocaine distribution across the Western Hemisphere, and in a single synchronized day, its arteries had been cut, one city, one port, one network at a time. As the raids concluded across the continent, the noise of the operation faded. Helicopters lifted away. Doors were sealed. Evidence was boxed and tagged. What followed was not pursuit or confrontation, but something far more final. Investigators turned inward, away from weapons, warehouses, and fugitives, toward intent, authorship, and command. Responsibility. Inside secured facilities, forensic teams began assembling the last layer of evidence, recovered from the bunker beneath Miraf, Flores Palace. This phase unfolded in silence. No explosions, no siren. Maritime corridors cleared. Without inspection. Profit sharing. Schedules allocating fixed percentages to specific accounts month after month, year after year. The language was formal, bureaucratic, almost mundane, but the content was devastating. FBI analysts confirmed what defense attorneys would later be unable to dispute. The approvals were not forged. They were not spoofed. They were not the work of rogue subordinates acting beyond their authority. Each document carried valid credentials, authenticated signatures and access tokens tied directly to the highest offices of state power. This was not negligence, was governance. Financial reconstruction followed and the picture expanded. Further, DA investigators working with international partners traced billions of dollars in narcotics proceeds through layers of shell companies nested within shell companies, corporate structures designed to dissolve accountability while preserving control. Sure, accounts in Panama, Cyprus, and the Caribbean funneled money into real estate portfolios in Miami, Madrid, and Dubai. Luxury condominiums, private villas, commercial properties held through proxies, yachts, aircraft, and high-end vehicles were purchased not merely for indulgence but as mobile vaults, assets that could move value across borders faster than any wire transfer. Artworks changed hands privately. Insurance policies were leveraged as collateral. Entire wealth management ecosystems existed for one purpose: to turn cocaine into permanence. As the numbers came together, even veteran investigators paused. The scale exceeded anything previously documented. At its peak, the network had moved an estimated 300 tons of cocaine annually, generating revenues exceeding $12 billion per year over a 10-year span. Analysts concluded that more than 1,200 tons had entered global markets through this system. But the most sobering metric was not financial. It was human. Each shipment represented addictions seeded into cities. Route corresponded with spikes in overdose deaths, gang violence, and systemic collapse far from the origin point. Tens of thousands of lives, mothers, fathers, sons, daughters had been lost along supply lines protected by state authority. The cost was not abstract. It was counted in emergency room reports, morgue records, and empty seats at kitchen tables. As indictments were drafted, intelligence analysts confirmed something even more chilling. The structure uncovered beneath Mira Flores Palace had not been designed to serve a single leader or a single term. Strategic planning files detailed contingency protocols for leadership change, redundant command nodes to survive arrests and expansion, blueprints for additional underground facilities across the country. The system anticipated disruption and planned for it. This was not a partnership between a state and organized crime. It was a state reorganized around organized crime. Drug revenue had financed political campaigns, paid off judges, bought loyalty within the military and security services, funded propaganda operations designed to shape public perception and suppress dissent. The line between government and cartel had not been blurred. It had been erased. By late January 2026, the final threshold was crossed. The head of state and 14 senior officials were formally placed into federal custody to face prosecution in the United States. The charges were sweeping: narrow terrorism, racketeering, conspiracy to traffic controlled substances, money laundering, and violations carrying mandatory life sentences. There would be no negotiated resolution, no plea agreements, no political compromise. The evidence was exhaustive. The paper trail was unbroken. Court filings detailed not just criminal acts but a command structure. Who authorized what, when, and for how much. Defense arguments of ignorance collapsed under time stamps, access logs, and digital signatures. This was not a case built on testimony alone. It was built on the regime's own records. Back in Caracas, Miraf Flores Palace stood intact. Its marble halls were quiet once more. Guards resumed ceremonial posts. The building itself had survived the operation untouched. But the